The forensic video analysis contract was completely standard, but for two things Reina had never seen before. A redaction where the company's title usually went, and a personal note from a boss who she had only met over video call a handful of times. Tell me if they're like what the news says, if they'll let you tell me anything at all. They asked for someone with experience and a strong stomach. The company's name was redacted, but the address wasn't hiding anything. 594 West Amazon Avenue. The note burned a hole in her head for the entire 2-hour tram ride to the job site. It didn't make sense. That company had dozens of normal contracts flowing through the government's surveillance branch at any given time to keep up with a stream of cases that required a video analysis confirmation. A survey taken that year said that an employee at the fulfillment center was fired every 5 minutes. All of those firings used video evidence that was vetted by a third party, the surveillance branch, for legal posterity. So what was so special about this contract? Why redact a name that was so obvious and ask for someone with thick skin? At one point, a beggar that had correctly assumed Reina was a fresh mark approached her. Reina, deep into her theories, didn't want to hear his story. Instead, she woke up her watch and navigated its interface with her neural link. $30 left her account and dropped into the disheveled man's. He looked up from his own watch, nodded his thanks, and moved onto the next tram car. The tram came to a stop in front of what the intercom announced as the fulfillment center. She and a dozen few workers piled out of the cars and walked towards the building.
Miss Ishimura.
Beside the rows of employee and visitor turnstiles, a short woman in a beige business dress waved towards Reina and approached her with an outstretched hand and a wide smile.
Glad I caught you,
the woman said.
I'm Kathy, head of the fulfillment center. Walk with me.
They walked through a visitor turnstile into a massive lobby filled with a mix of customer, worker, and green/beige packaging stations for walk-in customers to use. She wasn't able to get a good look at it, though she noticed the path to the warehouse proper was massive and filled with mandatory security checkpoints. Past a door near one of the checkpoints was a security suite almost as big as the lobby, with an ocean of carefully monitored LCDs projecting footage of packages being processed. Kathy led them to an elevator on the far side of the suite.
Miss Ishimura,
Kathy said with her wide plastic smile.
We hope. What's your last name? Excuse me? What's your last name? If you're going to call me Miss, I'd like to do the same. Ooh, I like it,
Kathy said with a smile that didn't hide the lie very well.
Then I'm Miss Emerson. Your temporary workstation is in an isolated room on the 2nd floor, or the 6th and 7th stories to be more precise, right next to the new residential sector. Oh, I thought those didn't work out too well for the companies that tried them. They didn't. Does this contract have to do with one of those failures? Bullseye,
Kathy said, shaking her head and digging a 50-milligram nicotine patch out of her suit pocket.
Mind if I speak to you bluntly from here on out? I had to watch the footage this morning, and I'm tired.
She gave Reina a pleading look as she tore the packaging off the patch and put it on her upper arm next to 2 other patches.
Yes, please,
Reina said.
I'll do the same.
Kathy looked up sharply at what she assumed was a jab, but saw only honesty in Reina's expression. Her smile shrank, yet became more genuine as she massaged the patch under her shoulder.
You know what? I changed my mind. I'm glad you're here, but don't tell my boss I said that. Do you usually give all your other clients the same shit?
The elevator door slid open. Reina followed Kathy into a long hallway lined with cement and cheap fluorescent lights. The money behind the company only went so far to make an impression at the entrance, it seemed.
Kind of,
Reina said.
It's not so much shit as it is me trying to be professional while also making sure clients understand that I don't have a walk here sign pointing towards my back. Smart girl,
Kathy said as they came to the end of the hallway. The door at the end was as plain as every other in the warehouse so far, except for the keyhole above the card reader. Reina hadn't seen analog key since she'd first started her internship at the branch. Even physical cards were on the way out and only used in boonies outside of the major cities.
We don't take any chances,
Kathy said, noticing Reina's amazement at the keyhole. A dirty brass key went into the hole, followed by a plastic card on the electronic reader and a third lock activated by Kathy's neural link. On the other side of the door was an office space barely 30 feet square and lit by old-fashioned fluorescent bulb panels. Right in the middle of the space was a black, ergonomic office chair, a nondescript desk. Kathy took a chair on one side of the desk and pulled out 2 large pairs of glasses. Raina took the other.
These glasses contain a very specific and very confidential VR setup of the footage that will interface with your neural link,
Kathy said, reading from a tablet she'd brought out from her pocket.
We'll play the footage only once as mandated by the law, but we will not allow any pauses or rewinds once we've started. I can't give you many of the details, but I can tell you that the company was trying a new form of automation in the residential district. There were few survivors. Was there anything else you'd like to know before we start?
Some pretty grotesque stuff,
Raina asked.
Yes, I won't bullshit you.
I appreciate it. Let's get this over with then.
Raina had gotten very good at putting on a stoic mask, but it was cracking. She could have backed out of the contract, only in the sense a deep-sea cave explorer could back out after her lifeline and electricity had been cut mid-dive.
I'll be watching it with you, if that's worth anything,
Kathy said.
I had to watch it alone this morning. That, and I'm overriding the no-pause rule. We can take a break anytime you like. I appreciate it, Kathy.
No problem, Raina.
They put the glasses on and watched the company's groundbreaking attempt at work automation in their budding residential district. The 0-hour workweek was proposed as a bridge between workspace automation, artificial intelligence, and the common worker. It took years of trials, simulations, and legal red tape to make it happen, but there was nothing more suited to the task than the biggest company on the planet, with the promise of both a free move into the residential district that was also going through a trial run, as well as a nice increase in pay. There was no shortage of volunteers. Only those with no criminal record or history of Neuralink malfunction were allowed to apply. The Neuralink history was more scrutinized than anything else, as a Neuralink was mandatory for the program. 20 fulfillment shift supervisors were picked randomly out of a pool of hundreds, each located into a pre-furnished one-bedroom apartment in a sequestered section near the front of the residential district. Among amenities such as ovens, sinks, and bathtubs, the new residents were allowed to pick from one of the few bonus daily morning activities that the company would provide. The group chose a new morning guided painting routine that utilized a red paint made with waste collected from the showers of the test subjects' apartments. A popular health vlog had been promoting it as, quote, enhancing the compatibility of both your spirit and your Neuralink via macro frequencies of dead skin cells, end quote. The company was happy to provide a service that was relatively dirt cheap before the morning activations. The activations were done in an isolated room in front of touchscreen panels as tall and wide as each of the subjects. Nobody outside of the board of directors was allowed to see the activations take place, and the company president himself guided the subjects through the process via video call that was replaced by recording for subsequent activation/deactivations. When the subjects emerged into the fulfillment center, they weren't conscious, yet they wrapped pallets, sorted packages, even piloted drones to the best of their ability. Even if talking had been allowed in the workplace, each of the workers were so isolated that contact was rarely made while on the clock. To the regular workers, nothing about the subjects looked odd or stood out. Maybe their movements were slightly more robotic than usual, but that was par for the course of the fulfillment center. At the end of the day shift, the subjects each returned to the activation room. 10 minutes later, they would walk out into the residential district, celebrating and talking eagerly with each other. Nobody had experienced the shift they'd worked. In the blink of an eye, everyone was 8 hours older, richer, and tired from a long day at work. They loved it.
I mean, let's not kid ourselves,
one of the workers said on the way to the rooftop park for a beer.
This is only so the assholes up top can say they are a pro-human labor company, right?
The others agreed, but nobody backed out of the deal. To them, there was nothing better than cutting the work out of life, getting paid quite well for the work they didn't do, and doing nothing but enjoying their time off. For weeks, the 20 subjects did their morning finger painting, went through the activation process, blinked, and a day of back-breaking work was behind them. During days off, parties thrown at any one of the subjects' apartments were common. Biotechnical information and in-person interviews both said the same thing. These people were the happiest they'd been in their lives. 2 weeks after the program started, One of the subjects made an odd motion during the deactivation process. This was nothing new. Unconscious bodies are actually more prone to stray impulses than conscious ones, and the odd body movement or spasm was common. What wasn't common was the writing on the side of the subject's activation station, done with a nondescript company whiteboard marker. Am I alive? The subject was interviewed numerous times and ran through program calibrations after the incident, though the company didn't inform him of what he'd done during unconsciousness. Instead, they watched. The next day, right before the deactivation process, the subject made another odd movement. Yes, he'd written, presumably to himself, I am. The subject was taken off the program. He'd keep the pay bump apartment and was told he'd be signed back up for the program when it officially launched. The first signs of trouble were both too hidden and too varied to notice at first. None of the program deviations allowed a pattern, save for a few towards the last days of the program. It's believed that 10 of the subjects started to pass physical notes to each other while they were supposed to be working and unconscious. These notes weren't found until after the investigation. There's no doubt that what happened next could have been prevented if the subjects were watched just a little more closely. This group would be referenced as, quote, the talkers, end quote, in the investigations due to the notes and the shared mass hysteria that followed.
The talkers?
Raina asked during one of her and Kathy's breaks. Kathy nodded.
The suits can get away with silly nicknames and titles. We get the serial numbers and QR codes. Shows you how much they care, right? Absolutely.
Raina put her VR glasses back on before she could notice the shameful, guilty look Kathy had accidentally given her. The other subjects each began showing varying degrees of behavioral anomalies. Fewer hours were spent outside of their apartments. Quality of sleep sank to substandard levels. One subject, even after the company warned her not to do so, started to do the activation process after finishing her shifts at work. She'd only be voluntarily conscious on weekends that she spent in her room, cuddled on her couch looking at her company tablet. During one of her unconscious working hours, the subject, quote, woke up, end quote, and collapsed to the floor screaming. The subject was taken off the program and sent to a correctional resort/facility. 7 others dropped out of the program soon after, citing nightmares and lapses in consciousness. Each of them were offered to stay in the residential district, but all refused. Administration and technicians were worried, but with no obvious negative signs from those that would become the talkers, the program continued. The next day, the last subject that was visibly showing signs of abnormality abruptly left the building during her shift. She was still unconscious and showed no sign or reaction to the guards in the lobby that barred her way. After some minutes, the subject abruptly turned and headed back into the fulfillment center and finished her shift. Just before the deactivation process, she ran to an emergency stairwell. The cameras recorded her keeping a calm and neutral face all the way to the roof she would jump from. Luckily, the low visibility suicide nets around the roof perimeter stopped the situation from escalating, but the subject didn't survive. Company emergency responders had to use a crane to retrieve the body. The woman had bit her own tongue off and used it to clog her airways and self-asphyxiate. Her expression, even in death, was completely neutral. Her heart rate was recorded at 220 beats per minute before flatlining. It was decided the program would be put on hiatus at the beginning of the next work week. The 7 remaining subjects were told not to activate the program and enjoy their weekend. Each agreed vehemently that stopping the project and letting the company make improvements was the best option. In the middle of the night, they all rose from their beds at the same time. The footage reviewed afterwards showed each of them doing odd motions with their fingers in their sleep before waking up, ones that mirrored their morning guided painting. It took the overnight security team 5 minutes to notice each of the remaining subjects walking around their section of the residential district, talking to each other in just slightly robotic tones and motions. They gathered in one apartment with all the food and water they could gather before barricading the front door. One stray subject stayed in the foyer and tried to escape using the emergency stairwell, elevator, and exit into the other parts of the residential district. They'd all been deactivated by security, though the lone subject managed to rip his fingernails off prying open the poorly maintained door to the elevator shaft. After discovering that he could still call the elevator up and down the shaft, in the footage, you can see the subject nod, walk to the elevator shaft, and throw himself down towards the bottom. The standoff with the subject still barricaded in the apartment lasted a week. Their food supply was gone in 2 days, while their water was gone in 3. Despite orders from the armed forces, reassurances from technicians and on-site company therapists, none of the subjects ever responded to anything said to them. Armed forces repeatedly tried to get into the apartment, but the door was solid steel and barred with an emergency latch that the company claimed weren't supposed to be installed. The subjects never slept, most resorting to self-harm and mutilation to stay awake. None of them made any extreme expression or outcry to the pain, though all over their heart rates and brain activity were off the charts. Rather than fall asleep, a few piled into the bathtub and slit their throats. A few more hung themselves with towels and bed sheets. The last to die was constantly nodding off after 5 days of continuous consciousness that wasn't supposed to be possible. Just as his brain waves were calming and it looked like he would fall asleep, he stood, walked to the bathroom, and lay on top of the corpses already piled in the bathtub before following in their steps. The lone survivor had tried to join the others in death, but was so exhausted and delirious that he knocked himself unconscious trying to dash his brains across the kitchen counter. He was immediately sedated and sent to the nearest hospital. He woke screaming in the hospital bed, though he couldn't remember anything after he'd fallen asleep that first night. He was later sent to a joint rehabilitation resort facility and will be cared for by the company for the rest of his life. Raina dropped her Neuralink glasses to the floor. Her and Kathy were covered in sweat and bits of vomit that had come out before they'd reached the bathroom.
Jesus Christ,
Raina said, tears flowing down her face. Kathy just nodded. Raina set up a video conference call with her boss, Kathy, a senior member to the company board, and both of the company's union representatives. After a heated conversation that had to be given an overnight recess, a concession was finally made to give each of the employees that had survived the trial program lifelong work, office work, Raina made sure, and housing by the company. The last point of the contention had been how the story would be presented to the media. None of the subjects had family and few friends, and all were content with the deal that the company and union offered. What they decided to put on the press release concerning the dead workers was simple: foodborne illness.
Do you think they'll ever try something similar?
Raina asked Kathy as they both walked out to take the tram. It hadn't stopped raining.
They're already working on the second iteration of the program,
Kathy said, a haunted look in her eyes as she put a 5th nicotine patch on her arm.
I wonder how long it'll take for them to get it right,
Raina said with disdain.
Maybe after a single update to the Neuralink software, right?
Kathy chuckled. It was a hollow, humorless sound that made Raina feel cold.
Have a good night, Raina,
she said, stepping off the tram and heading towards the upper middle-class apartments that were a fair ways away from the cheaper ones that Raina lived in. During the ride, Raina tried not to think about what she'd seen, and even worse, what she could never talk to someone about. The case had been reviewed and stamped as, quote, taken care of, end quote. She'd done her job. A few minutes after she fell asleep that night, a freak bug in her Neuralink's programming fried the front half of her brain. The apartment complex's corpse disposal team didn't think twice as they took pictures of the body, stuffed it into a bag, and took it to the local cremation center. Kathy watched the cremation. She was shaking. She had lost count of the nicotine patches on her arms. She told her boss when the cremation was over, gave herself a slap to wake her up, and headed back to work. After all of the documentation had finished processing and could be funneled down the right channels, there was a new supervisor at the warehouse. None of the workers saw Kathy again. Both her and Raina's ashes were left in the same unmarked compartments of the company's corpse disposal/elderly retirement center. The paint automation protocol was scheduled to continue testing a week later. Man, wow, that took a dark turn. I mean, it was dark all the way through, but it's really kind of surprising at the end there. Why did they kill Kathy? Kathy watched Raina die, but then she was murdered too. Not sure why that happened. Oh, maybe to wipe off anyone that saw the footage. But the first good part of this story reminded me of the show Severance. It's very popular. You might have seen it by now. It's an Apple TV Plus original, where they there's workers that have chips in their brains, and when they go to their workplace, which is office work, they become a different person basically. So it is a complete separation between life and work. Just like this story said, you are just 8 hours of your life gone, 8 hours richer, and, a little bit tired, I guess. I mean, they were doing office work, so I'm not sure how tired they were. But, yeah, very popular show. It's pretty good. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. You can just pirate it online somewhere, probably. But if you don't have Apple TV. But, yeah, pretty good story. Really dark. I liked reading this one. I don't know why. I just enjoyed the reading process for this story, I guess. It was very, robotic, and I got to read pretty, monotone, and I don't know why, but I kind of like that. I usually don't read very monotone in the stories. So, yeah, hopefully you enjoy listening to this one. It is another short one because, again, on Thursday, hopefully you should be getting an hour and 40-minute story. So, I am working on that one as well. So, yeah, hopefully you enjoy this one. Hopefully you enjoy that one to come in a couple days here. And I will see you in the next Ego Volt Anima Vestra.